of Judiciary, gentleman from New York, Jerry Nadler.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a series of questions to try to keep the answers brief because I only have 5 minutes. Do you have any knowledge of whether prior to or after the leak of Ms. Wilson's covert identity, either the Vice President or the President declassified her covert status in order to have it leaked to reporters?
No, I do not.
And do you have any information on the role, if any, played by the Vice President in the leaking of Ms. Wilson's identity?
No, no direct knowledge of that.
And do you have any idea why Vice President Cheney may have knowingly, indirectly, or directly instructed you to publicly exonerate Mr. Libby?
No, sir, I do not. Was not a party to that conversation with the President.
Do you have any idea whether at the time he knew that Mr. Libby had in fact been involved in the leak?
I'm sorry, huh?
Do you have any idea whether when he gave that instruction that he knew at that time that Mr. Libby had in fact been involved in the leak?
No, I do not know that.
In any event, did you come to learn that Karl Rove and Scooter Libby had lied to you and that each of them was involved in the plane leak?
Yes, I did.
Could you comment on that briefly, how you learned that?
That was in, first in July of 2005 when it was about to be reported in the media. I learned that Karl Rove had revealed her identity to Matt Cooper of Time magazine, and then a short time after that it was Robert Novak, and then within the next few months it was learned that Scooter Libby had also revealed her identity to reporters.
Okay, now, the President had promised the American people, had stated publicly when this first came out, that he was going to investigate internally, find out who had leaked the information, whoever had leaked would no longer be in the administration, etc., because this was a terrible thing. Do you know what steps, if any, were taken by the White House to conduct an internal investigation into the leak?
As far as I know, the White House counsel's office worked to provide information to the Justice Department that was gathered during the process of the investigation at their request, emails and things of that nature, but I don't know of any internal...
You don't know of any internal investigation to find out for the President so that he could fire or do what he
My understanding was that we weren't doing any of that.
You weren't doing any of that. Now, the President commuted Mr. Libby's sentence. Now, this would seem... Well, do you regard this as in any way in violation of the President's pledge to find out all the information he could and make it public about this?
Well, I certainly think that the President should have stuck by his word on the matter, and I certainly view the commutation as it was special treatment. It does undermine our system of justice, in my view.
But I'm not sure what you were saying in the first part. The President's commutation of Mr. Libby's sentence was somehow not standing by his word?
Well, I don't know that it was not standing by his word. I don't know that he said anything specifically about a commutation, but he did say anyone that was involved in this would know. And I said on his behalf, no one would not be in this situation any longer. So. And
do you think, would you regard the President's commutation as? Do you think it's fair to infer, from your knowledge, that the President's commutation of Mr. Libby's of the conviction or whatever it was, that his commutation was part of an effort to, in fact, assure that all the facts would not become public, part of a cover-up, in fact?
I do not know that. I do not make that claim, and I do not have the information to know whether or not that was the thinking. I'd already left the White House by the time he commuted Scooter Libby, but there were a lot of suspicions that are raised of that action.
Okay. Now, switching subjects, in your book, and before I go to this last question, let me, on behalf of some members of the committee, apologize to you for the aspersions as to your motives instead of asking you questions about the truth or evidence of what you wrote that we heard a few minutes ago. Such character assassination is no business in this committee. In your book, Mr. McClellan, you state that the Iraq War was sold to the American people with a sophisticated political propaganda campaign that included overstating intelligence in Iraq, manipulating sources of public opinion, and downplaying the major reason for going to war. As the President's former deputy and chief press secretary, this is a very serious charge. Could you explain why you think that this was a political propaganda campaign as opposed to simply informing the American public as to what was going on?
Well, it was a marketing campaign or a propaganda campaign, however you want to refer to it. What I talk about in the book is that we took this permanent campaign mentality that is used on other issues like Social Security or education reform and used it to take the nation to war and sold the nation on the premise that Iraq was a grave and gathering danger. We now know that it was not, that the case was overstated, it was overpackaged in the way that the intelligence was used. That was something...
And by overpackaging the way the intelligence was used, do you mean that they were declassifying only those portions of intelligence that seemed to indicate the threat and not those forces of the intelligence that downplayed the threat or said we're not sure of this information?
Public record that they were ignoring caveats and ignoring contradictory intelligence. The implication and innuendo that was used to talk about the connection to Al-Qaeda, for instance, is one example. The Senate Intelligence Committee, for the first time, just released a report about how the intelligence was used.
And therefore,
therefore
misrepresenting the facts and misleading Congress and the American people? Is that a fair
I think
statement?
it was more to make the strongest possible case, and in doing so, they ignored caveats, they ignored contradictory,
and mislead and misrepresent.
and
therefore,
it had that effect. I do not think it was necessarily deliberate on the part of a group. Whether individuals were doing things intentionally or deliberately, I do not know, but I don't think there was a group sitting around trying to conspire to say, let's mislead the American people. Instead, it was, how do we make the strongest possible case? But when you're going to war, it is particularly troubling when you use that kind of mentality and you don't speak about the truth of the situation as best you know them, including the contradictory intelligence, including the caveats and qualifications, and including the consequences, the risk, and the cost of going into war, and we did not do that.
Thank you very much.
Recognizes the distinguished gentleman from North